Japanese people's beloved Mount Fuji hides a great danger behind it: the ever-present threat of eruption. Mount Fuji's eruption is a theme often found in novels and movies. But in reality, it is an active volcano. Japanese volcanic experts monitor Mount Fuji's volcanic activity 24 hours to gather valuable data and alert nearby residents to evacuate and save lives as early as possible. Residents of Tokyo are also affected by the volcanic eruption, as it endangers lives and can cause computers and appliances to malfunction due to volcanic ash. Power plants may also be unable to operate normally. In winter, the snow-capped summit of Mount Fuji looks stunningly beautiful. Most people would assume that if Mount Fuji erupted, lava would spew out of the volcanic crater at the peak. However, experts have discovered that an eruption may not necessarily occur at the summit. Instead, it could happen as far as 2 kilometers from the peak, near residential areas. Director Akito from Japan will introduce how Mount Fuji might erupt, the disasters it could cause, and explore the mystery of the large protrusion on the slope of Mount Fuji. In major cities like Tokyo and Osaka, there is a 70% possibility of a magnitude 7 or greater earthquake occurring within the next 30 years. Despite their best efforts, experts cannot make more accurate earthquake predictions. So, what about volcanic eruptions? There are precursors to a volcanic eruption, such as low-frequency earthquakes or volcanic tremors. You might feel reassured, waiting for news reports before preparing to evacuate or canceling a trip to Japan. However, nature is unpredictable. In October 2021, Mount Aso, an active volcano in Kumamoto Prefecture, Kyushu, suddenly erupted. Fortunately, there were no casualties. Experts cannot predict when eruptions will occur, as Mount Aso continuously experiences irregular volcanic tremors. Tremors don't necessarily lead to eruptions but occur before an eruption. Even with the latest 21st century technology and theories, it is impossible to determine which volcanic tremors will be followed by an eruption. This is known as a precursor to a volcanic eruption. Is this kind of prediction helpful? The same goes for Mount Fuji. Volcanic activity should be detected before an eruption, but the exact timing cannot be accurately predicted. Even if a volcanic activity is detected, an eruption could occur just a few hours later. Furthermore, the Nankai megathrust earthquakes might trigger an eruption of Mount Fuji. Japan is not only a country with frequent earthquakes, but also a country with many volcanoes. Of the approximately 1,500 active volcanoes worldwide, 7% or 111 of them are concentrated in Japan. Among them are well-known volcanoes such as Mount Aso, Sakurajima volcano in Kagoshima, and the iconic Mount Fuji. You may have heard that an active volcano has erupted or emitted smoke within the last 10,000 years. Even if classified as active, there's no need for excessive fear. Unfortunately, the situation with active volcanoes in Japan is a bit special. Around 10 active volcanoes across Japan experience eruptions of various scales each year. The data is shocking and beyond imagination, as it's not just once every 10,000 or a few thousand years that volcanic activity occurs. Japan's 111 active volcanoes are highly active, with about half of them, around 50, monitored 24 hours a day for any abnormalities. Sakurajima volcano is considered the most active in Japan, erupting every year or multiple times yearly. During eruptions, large amounts of volcanic ash are released, and residents try to stay indoors as much as possible. Afterward, they have to clean up the massive amounts of ash. Other frequently erupting active volcanoes include Mount Aso, Mount Ontake in Nagano Prefecture, and Mount Yusu in Hokkaido. So, what about Mount Fuji? Mount Fuji has not erupted in the last 300 years, nor has any significant minor volcanic activity. Many people feel reassured upon hearing this, mistakenly believing that Mount Fuji won't erupt in their lifetime. Unfortunately, the reality is quite the opposite. The fact that Mount Fuji hasn't erupted in 300 years makes it concerning. When Mount Fuji erupts next is unpredictable, even for experts. In other words, it could happen at any time. Predicting the timing of the next eruption is similar to predicting earthquakes, where examining records can be used for estimation. Since the year 781, when written records began, Mount Fuji has erupted 17 times. The most recent eruption was in 1707. In the past 900 years, there have been 17 eruptions, averaging one eruption every 55 years. However, Earth is more complex and consistent than one might imagine. Of the 17 eruptions, 12 occurred within 200 years from 800 to 1083. In contrast, after 1083, the next eruption was in 1511, more than 400 years later. It has been over 300 years since the major eruption in 1707, and Mount Fuji has not erupted. Based solely on previous records, it's impossible to predict when the next eruption will occur. Experts have tried various methods to gather information. When written records were insufficient, they conducted field investigations and geological research. Experts discovered that Mount Fuji is an unusual volcano. What we see on the surface is only the outer shell of Mount Fuji. At the same time, several older volcanoes are buried inside. The current Mount Fuji, known as New Fuji Volcano, formed only 10,000 years ago. Beneath it lie the ancient Fuji Volcano, Mount Komitake and Sinkomitake Volcano, as well as part of Mount Ashitaka. Between 700,000 and 200,000 years ago, Mount Fuji's predecessor was the Komitake volcano, which experienced multiple eruptions and eventually reached a height of about 2,400 meters, 1,000 meters shorter than the current Mount Fuji. The summit of Mount Komitake can still be seen today, located near the Komitake Shrine at the 5th station of Yoshida climbing route. About 100,000 years ago, multiple eruptions occurred on the middle slopes of Mount Komitake, forming the Old Fuji, which covered most of the original Mount Komitake. After remaining dormant for over 4,000 years, the Old Fuji began erupting again, ultimately forming the New Fuji volcano, which is present-day Mount Fuji. Studying Mount Fuji from a geological perspective reveals its formation process is more complex than initially thought. Not only are its eruption cycles irregular, but the volcanic vents where eruptions occur also differ. The research findings make predictions difficult to use. When you understand the complex structure of Mount Fuji, you will appreciate the challenges of predicting when it will erupt. The beautiful surface of Mount Fuji belies its dramatic and hidden past. Besides climbing Mount Fuji to watch the sunrise, tourists worldwide visit the nearby Fuji 5 Lakes and Aokigahara Forest. These two major attractions were formed by the landscape created during the 9th century eruption of Mount Fuji. That massive eruption, recorded in history as the Jogan eruption, spewed vast amounts of lava that flowed toward the northern forest area, scorching the forest. Over time, trees regrew, animals began to inhabit the area, and it took 1,200 years to become the Aokigahara Forest, now a popular destination for hiking and camping. In the 1970s, influenced by a Japanese TV drama, it also became a suicide hotspot, with hundreds of bodies discovered every year. The lava not only formed an Aokigahara forest, but also flowed into a lake called Sinawami. It filled most of the lake, dividing it into two separate lakes, Lake Seiko and Lake Shojinko. The lava also filled part of Lake Motosu on the west side. The original Fuji 4 lakes became the Fuji 5 lakes due to this volcanic eruption. The power of the volcanic eruption can be imagined. If lava were to float toward a city, everything would be reduced to ashes. For the past 300 years, Mount Fuji has been unusually calm. Mount Fuji's appearance is beautiful, with smooth slopes from afar. However, looking closely, you might notice a protruding area on the slope at certain angles. What is this? Let's change perspectives and view it from above. It turns out to be a large hole, not just an ordinary hole, but a volcanic vent of Mount Fuji. During the most recent major eruption, the lava did not come from the summit of Mount Fuji, but instead from this spot. One of Japan's two major earthquakes, the Nankai megathrust earthquake, occurs every 90 to 150 years. In 1707, the Hoi earthquake occurred, and 49 days later, Mount Fuji experienced a major eruption. The Japanese call this eruption the Hoi eruption. Lava erupted from the southeastern flank of Mount Fuji, lasting for 16 days and creating not just one but three volcanic vents. These three vents are the Hoi craters, and the small Hoi mountain formed next to them is the protruding area on the slope of Mount Fuji. The eruption of Mount Fuji is unpredictable not only in terms of timing, but also in the location. The eruption is much more complex than many people imagine. Ash from this eruption was carried by westerly winds to Tokyo, 100 kilometers away, and persisted for 2 weeks, darkening the sky even during the day. The ash accumulated up to 8 centimeters thick, severely impacting crops. It is recorded that it took 90 years for the crop yields in Odinwala to recover to pre-eruption levels. Hoi eruption was the largest recorded eruption of Mount Fuji, causing severe damage to Shizuoka Prefecture, Kanagawa Prefecture, Chiba Prefecture, and Tokyo. However, the Japanese people did not choose to relocate but stayed and rebuilt their homes. Like with significant earthquakes, the Japanese people decided to stay. When Mount Fuji is not erupting, it indeed provides valuable natural resources to the surrounding area. Many people might assume that lava would spew from the volcanic crater at the summit if Mount Fuji erupted. However, experts say a large area could become a volcanic crater. Mount Fuji is located at the intersection of 3 tectonic plates: the Pacific Plate, the Eurasian Plate, and the Philippine Sea Plate, making it a relatively rare occurrence worldwide. Lava has been stored beneath Mount Fuji for 300 years without being released, which is why there are concerns that the next eruption could be more disastrous than the last major eruption. Hoi eruption. Mount Fuji, which could erupt at any time, is quite dangerous, considering that around 300,000 people climb it each year. If a volcanic eruption were to occur, hikers might not have anywhere to take refuge. Frequently erupting volcanoes like Mount Taeso and Sakurajima have evacuation shelters just in case. In 2014, hikers at Mount Ontoke in Nagano Prefecture could take refuge in evacuation shelters during eruption. Unfortunately, this disaster still claimed the lives of 63 people and left others missing. Because Mount Fuji has not erupted in over 300 years and the location of its crater is unclear, there are no evacuation shelters on the mountain, only mountain huts. If an eruption were to occur during a hike, there would be nowhere to take refuge. Of course, volcanic eruptions result in lava flows. The eruption that took place 1,200 years ago formed the Narokigahala forest and filled most of the Tsunoumi Lake. With temperatures reaching up to 1,200 degrees Celsius, anything in the path of the lava flow would be incinerated. Cities near Mount Fuji, such as Fuji Yoshida, Fuji Nomiya, and Gotemba, which has a shopping mall, are at high risk of lava flow damage. Lava flows are not very fast, so aside from older adults and those with limited mobility, most people would likely be able to avoid them. However, during a volcanic eruption, there is a highly destructive phenomenon known as pyroclastic flows. These consist of gases with temperatures reaching several hundred degrees Celsius, moving at speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour from the volcanic vent. It is almost impossible to escape if encountered, and survival chances are slim. In 1991, the eruption of Mount Unzen in Nagasaki Prefecture, Kyushu, claimed the lives of 43 people, while others suffered severe burns and respiratory damage from inhaling the gases. If Mount Fuji erupted, pyroclastic flows could reach urban areas. If the volcano erupts during winter, these flows will melt the accumulated snow on the mountain, increasing their destructive power. In May of 1926, the eruption of Mount Tokachi in central Hokkaido led to 144 deaths. The snow atop Mount Fuji creates a beautiful scene but can also be deadly. In addition, volcanic bombs several meters in diameter can be ejected, causing casualties as well as damage to buildings and vehicles. The Netflix animated series Tokyo Magnitude 8.0 has a plot line involving toxic volcanic gases that can be fatal if inhaled unknowingly. Even if no pyroclastic flows are visible during a volcanic eruption, it is unsafe to be complacent. People may temporarily seek refuge in lower areas of the terrain. Still, these areas can be dangerous due to the accumulation of heavier toxic gases. Lastly, volcanic ash cannot be ignored. If Mount Fuji erupted, ash would be carried by the wind to Tokyo. The power of volcanic ash is not to be underestimated, as it is more than just a nuisance to clean up. Volcanic ash contains volcanic glass, which can scratch the eyes of those wearing contact lenses. Inhaling volcanic ash can also damage the respiratory system. Aside from being harmful to humans, volcanic ash can damage various machines, causing electrical shorts in appliances and computers, disabling air conditioning, and clogging water treatment plants, rendering them unable to supply water. Outdoor transformers can short circuit in the rain, leading to power outages, and underground drainage systems can be blocked by ash, causing flooding. Cleaning up volcanic ash can take at least several weeks. During this time, water, electricity, and transportation may come to a complete standstill, making life impossible and causing significant economic damage. There is also a dedicated crisis map for Mount Fuji eruptions. This map is updated based on research findings. Following the 2004 and 2014 editions, the latest revised edition was released in March 2021. The multiple revisions indicate the seriousness of a potential Mount Fuji eruption and remind residents to be prepared to minimize losses when an eruption occurs. The latest edition incorporates research findings on Mount Fuji's volcanic activity from 5,600 years ago. It predicts that the number of potential eruptive vents could increase from 40 to 252. The map simulates the disasters that may result from lava flows, pyroclastic flows, and volcanic ash if eruptions occur at each of these vents. Entering the 2000s, there were significant volcanic eruptions in Japan. Mount Yusu in Hokkaido in 2000, Mount Kirishima in Kyushu in 2011, Kuchinui Rabuji Minor Yakushima in 2015, and Mount Aso in Kumamoto Prefecture in 2021. The 2014 eruption of Mount Ontoki in Nagano Prefecture resulted in 63 fatalities. Japan faces the threat of volcanic eruptions every moment. Over the past 300 years, Much magma has accumulated beneath Mount Fuji, which has not erupted. Mount Fuji could erupt at any moment. The Meteorological Agency has set up over 30 observation stations on the mountain. Experts and university professors monitor volcanic activity around the clock to detect signs of an imminent eruption. The beautiful Mount Fuji may become unrecognizable after its next eruption, potentially causing severe human and economic losses in the capital region, including Tokyo. We hope that this symbol of Japan will not become a source of psychological trauma for its people.